Parkinson's is being speculated about, and so is something with the word Louie in it, Lewy.
Yes.
And could you just
Right.
explain what those two conditions are, just to kick this off? And just, I understand you haven't examined President Biden, you're not making any diagnosis about him,
Right.
but we're just wondering
Right.
what those conditions are.
Yeah, good point. And as you alluded to, the Goldwater rule prohibits physicians from making an actual diagnosis without meeting with the person, examining them, et cetera. So these two conditions are relatively common. There are over 1 million people in the United States with Parkinson's. There are over 1 million people with Lewy body disease. And as you indicated, these are often wrapped together because they both feature a specific protein, which is called alpha-synuclein. Now, when we talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about amyloid and we talk about tau. When you're talking about Parkinson's and Lewy body, it is this alpha-synuclein which makes up Lewy bodies. Now, if it's predominantly in the brain stem and you present mostly with movement problems, that is Parkinson's disease. If it's predominantly throughout the cerebrum, throughout the major part of the brain, and you're presenting first with cognitive change, and then you may develop some Parkinsonism later, then that's called Lewy body disease. But as you can see, they're closely related in their neuropathology. So those are the two conditions. And since you're talking about cognitive changes as well as potentially some motor changes, then you would probably be thinking about, are there Lewy body issues? But again, yeah, you can't make a diagnosis without evaluating the person. And of course, it's concerning because there is so much of what we do to devote to patient confidentiality. And of course, what's being asked right now is just the opposite.
I know it's different when you become president, right? It's like there's just, HIPAA and all the other privacy laws
Yeah.
are kind of out the window. So,
Yeah.
can you just explain the difference? And I want to get into some of the symptoms of these things a little bit more, but can you explain the difference between a neurological exam and a cognitive exam?
Yeah, and in fact, they are actually part of the same thing. And I think that was kind of missed by one of the representatives. So a neurological exam includes a cognitive exam, but it also includes other things: strength, sensation, balance, all those things. But it absolutely includes a cognitive exam.
And what would a cognitive exam include?
Yeah, so a cognitive exam is looking at basically the different areas of the brain. So how is your memory doing? How are you doing with respect to your executive function? How are you with your orientation? Do you know the day? Do you know the year? Do you know where you are? How are you doing with your verbal skills? Can you read? Can you repeat? Things like that. How are you doing with your spatial skills? Things like that. So all is basically testing the different areas. You often see these where people will ask you to draw a clock and put in the hands, that sort of thing. A non-digital clock, of course. And it's actually surprising at how early you may see changes in that based on the parts of the brain that are affected. So I think, Megyn, the thing that's really been missed here, everybody's got their opining, everybody's got their ideas. What's really been missed here is that there is a tremendous amount of advance in brain aging, in neurological testing, and in age-related testing, just in the last couple of years, things that weren't available before. So the reality is you don't need to speculate. There are specific tests that can be done very easily today. So there are blood tests, things like p-tau217 and GFAP and neurofilament light. These are new blood tests on the Alzheimer's side, and they're actually quite good and quite sensitive. p-tau217 in particular is specific for Alzheimer-related conditions, and so it'll even see it before you have major symptoms. On the other hand, there are some new tests for Parkinson's and Lewy body. And so there is one that's called SYN1, SYN-1, which is a simple skin biopsy. There is coming a wonderful test where you literally can take a small amount of sweat and you can look with mass spectrometry at a specific pattern of molecules that has turned out to be closely related to whether you have Lewy body disease, Parkinson's, or not. So things are changing. Of course, there's imaging. You can look at specific imaging in PET scans, for example, and you can look at fluorodopa uptake, for example, in Parkinson's. So the reality is that instead of all the speculation, of course, it would be very easy to look at those specific tests and know exactly where you stand.
So if they took such an exam, any of the ones you just mentioned, and it showed the president didn't suffer from any of those, it would be very simple to do and very simple to release to the public to quell some of the fears.
Absolutely.
But they won't. What they're saying right now is just rely on the neurological exam that was done at the annual physical back in February. And this is how they describe it, Doc. Tell me what you make of this. An extremely detailed neurologic exam was again reassuring. This is according to this latest letter we just got, in that there were no findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorders such as stroke, MS, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis, nor are there any signs of cervical myelopathy. So what does that mean in layman's terms?
Yeah, what that means in layman's terms is that the nervous system is intact. So, of course, as you develop Parkinson's or as you develop Alzheimer's, you begin to have specific problems. What they're saying is that those were evaluated. He did not have any symptoms to suggest stroke, Parkinson's disease, as you mentioned, myelopathy, which is just damage to your spinal cord, any of those things that can be a problem. So that's certainly a very good sign. And suggests that they've looked carefully at the function of his brain and spinal cord and not found any problems.
So again, not asking you to diagnose President Biden, who you haven't examined, but you saw, I'm sure, as we all did, what happened at that debate. And the stiffness of his movements over the past year, the mouth agape, the sort of the glazed, waxy complexion and eyes, the inability to remember basic facts that we absolutely know he knows or knew, the confusion, the inability to end sentences that he's begun. Could that just be aging? Because Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel has a lifelong Democrat, part of the Emanuel brother, triumvirate,
Right.
oncologist. He came out and said, this could be a neurologic problem, or it could just be advanced aging. People age at different rates. Either way, he's kind of making the point, I don't care. I don't care what it is. I know what I see. But what do you make of those symptoms?
Yeah, again, I think that there's very little mystery here. So here's the point as far as your brain. So what happens is, time is the broker through which all of us trade resilience and energy for wisdom and experience. So we get more wisdom and experience. And if, we're going to have to decide as voters, do we want that wisdom and experience or not? It does come. You are trading over your many years of wisdom and developing wisdom and experience. You are trading some degree of resilience. If you look at what changes from cradle to grave, the two major things that change, the two biggest changes, are in your mitochondria. Those are the batteries of your cells, and their DNA develops mutations over time. And then the other thing is your ability to respond to stress. So you take a very young person and you're changing time zones and keeping them up all night and flying them around and having back-to-back, 30 meetings in a row and all these sorts of stuff. That person will go through this. When I was an intern, when I was in my 20s, I would stay up all night for 2 or 3 nights in a row, which was horrible. I couldn't do that in my 70s today. So that is a big change over our lives. And so this is something that we as voters have to be aware of. Do we want someone with more experience and more wisdom, or do we want someone who may be more resilient, but they may make rash or less informed decisions? And I think that to me, that's what's going on right now. And I understand. So yes, what you see is stress related. Some people would say that, if I said something wrong, you might say Dale had a senior moment. And this happens to us septuagenarians if we are stressed dramatically. And that happens to many, many people. We're seeing, of course, a lot of things with COVID and brain fog. So many people who never had issues before now have some degree of brain fog. So I think you described it correctly. It's one of those things, and you're going to see when there is a tremendous amount of stress, that it's going to be tougher for anybody who is an octogenarian compared to a quintogenarian.
And certainly for the president of the United States, which is literally probably the most stressful job on earth. Let me tell you a story about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and came across a Doberman. This dog was severely underweight and clearly in trouble. Leo rescued the dog and named him Delta. Sadly, though, Delta was just one of many animals that needed help. And all this inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue. It's the largest no-kill, care for life animal sanctuary in the world. They've rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and even horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals with shelter, love, safety, a real home. April marked 45 years since Leo rescued Delta. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open. If you want caring for these animals to be part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner because there are tax benefits for you here too. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more and speak with your advisor. We call dogs man's best friend for a reason. You can help those who need it most. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.